If there is no self, who's born and who dies? The Buddha's answer. Part 1. What no self really means. When people first hear the teaching of no self, many quickly assume they already understand it. Some think it simply means nothing exists, or there is no one here. Others use it like a quick answer, as if saying, there's no self, can solve every question. But this is not what the Buddha was teaching. To begin, we need to carefully understand what we mean when we say self. In everyday life, most people think of the self as something solid, something personal that stays the same over time. We believe there is a permanent I inside, the one who is thinking, who is feeling, who is acting. This is the I we try to protect, the I we build our story around. It feels like the owner of this body, the owner of these emotions, the one making decisions. This is what most people mean when they talk about the self. But the Buddha taught that this belief is a mistake. He didn't say that people don't exist at all. He didn't say that nothing is happening. What he pointed to is this: there is no unchanging independent self inside any of us. What we usually call I is just a process. It is made of moving parts. It's not one thing, and it's not something we can hold. The Buddha explained this clearly through the teaching of the 5 aggregates. These are the 5 things that come together to create what we experience as a person: the body, form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, thought patterns, habits, memories, consciousness. These 5 parts are always changing. None of them are stable. None of them can be called me in any lasting way. The body changes. Feelings rise and fall. Perceptions shift. Thoughts come and go. Even consciousness, the knowing, is not fixed. It depends on conditions and keeps moving. In daily life, we usually don't see this. We hold tightly to the idea that there is someone behind all of this, a true self, a real owner. But the Buddha showed that this is an illusion. It's like building a house out of sand and believing it will last forever. There is a structure, but it is temporary. It is not something solid we can possess. Some people misunderstand no self to mean that there is nothing at all. But this is not correct. The Buddha never said there is nothing. He said there is no permanent self. There is a body. There are feelings. There are thoughts. There are actions. There is life. But these things are not owned by anyone. They are part of a process that is always moving, always dependent on causes and conditions. The mistake many people make is they jump too quickly from hearing no self to thinking, oh, nothing matters, no one exists. That's not what the Buddha taught. He taught us to observe carefully, to see with our own eyes how this body and mind work. When we look, we can see that things appear and disappear, but nowhere can we find a permanent self controlling them. The idea of I is useful in daily life, but it is not something real that stands alone. It is like calling a moving river by a name. The name is convenient, but the river keeps changing every moment. So no self is not something we should just believe. It is something we must see directly in our own experience. The Buddha's teaching is not asking us to repeat words. It's asking us to watch carefully. What am I protecting? Who am I holding on to? Is there really someone there? When we begin to see this, the way we look at life changes. But this is just the beginning. If there is no permanent self, then what exactly is born? That is the next question we need to explore. Part 2. If there's no self, what is really being born? Once we begin to understand that the self is not something solid, another question naturally appears. If there is no permanent self, then what is actually born? This is a question that many people find confusing, and if we answer it too quickly, we might miss something important. Most people grow up believing that birth means a soul or a fixed person enters the body. They imagine life begins when something, like a spirit, comes into the world and lives inside this body, carrying its identity from one life to another. This is the idea many people hold, whether they realize it or not. It feels personal. It feels like I came into this life. But this is not how the Buddha described birth. The Buddha taught that birth does not need a soul to appear. What we call birth is simply the moment when conditions come together in a certain way. There is no solid self that arrives. There is only a temporary pattern taking shape. Life is not something that belongs to someone. It is a process that unfolds based on causes and conditions. To help us see this, the Buddha explained the teaching of dependent origination. In simple terms, he showed us that birth happens because of a chain of conditions. It begins with ignorance, not seeing things clearly. From ignorance comes mental formations, the habits, patterns, and intentions we carry. From those formations, consciousness arises, the knowing, the awareness that depends on those patterns. When consciousness meets a new set of conditions, birth takes place. But what is being born is not a soul and not a fixed person. What is being born is a continuation, like one candle lighting another. The flame moves on, but the flame is not the same and not separate. There is no solid thing moving from here to there. There is only a continuation of energy, of karma, of momentum. The Buddha explained that what continues is karma, the force of intention and action. Karma is like the wind pushing the waves. The shape of each wave changes, but the movement continues. In this way, what is born is not you in the way we usually think. What is born is the result of conditions, shaped by past actions, but not owned by anyone. It's like this. Imagine a river flowing. You look at it in the morning, and you see the river. In the afternoon, you see the same river, but it's not the same water, and it's not the same moment. It's a continuation, but it's always changing. Birth is like that. It looks personal, but it's not. It looks solid, but it's not. It is just the next moment in a flowing process. Some people may feel uncomfortable with this idea. If I am not a fixed self, and if what is born is just a temporary formation, does my life even matter? But this question comes from the old habit of wanting to make the self permanent. The value of life is not in its permanence. The value is in how we live, in how we touch the world, in the choices we make right now. The Buddha was not asking us to feel empty or meaningless. He was asking us to look carefully, to see that life is not about a soul moving from place to place. It is about seeing the conditions that shape each moment. When we understand this, we can live more lightly. We don't need to hold life so tightly. Birth is not the start of a fixed self. It is the unfolding of causes. But if birth is just the continuation of conditions, then what about death? If no one was really born, then what does it mean for life to end? Part 3. If there's no one born, what actually ends? If what is born is not a fixed self, then what does it mean to die? This question often stays quietly in our hearts. Even when we begin to understand that life is a process, the thought of death still feels personal. There is often a silent fear that when death comes, everything will simply vanish, that we will disappear as if we were never here. But most of the time, what people truly fear is not death itself. It is the fear of being forgotten. We are afraid that no one will remember our story. We are afraid that our small life will leave no trace, as if we never mattered. This fear quietly drives us to build a self, to build achievements, to create something we hope will remain after we are gone. The Buddha taught that this fear is built on a misunderstanding. He did not say that death is the complete ending of everything. But he also did not say that there is a permanent soul continuing forever. The Buddha carefully warned us not to fall into either extreme, believing in total disappearance or believing in an eternal self. Both miss the deeper truth. When the body dies, when the breath stops, the arrangement we called a person naturally comes apart. The 5 aggregates, body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, dissolve. But this does not mean life disappears into nothing. It simply means the temporary shape we used to call me is no longer held together. What remains after death is not someone, but life's quiet traces. When a flower fades, its scent still lingers in the air. When a voice stops, the echo can still be heard. When a person passes, the impact of their kindness, their choices, their actions, all of these remain in the lives they touched. Not as something owned, not as a soul continuing, but as a quiet ripple moving through time. There is no solid self that death can take away. There is no permanent person that can vanish. What we fear losing was never a fixed thing to begin with. The life we protect is not something we can lock in place. It was always moving, always shared, always shaped by conditions we cannot fully hold. Some people imagine that after death, something personal must continue, like a name, a soul, or a memory that belongs to me. But the Buddha showed that what continues is not a person. What continues is life itself, unfolding in new ways, through new conditions, but without a self that owns it. The fear that we might become nothing is built on the belief that there was ever a solid me to begin with. When we let go of that belief, we can meet life and death with more softness. Death is no longer the loss of someone. It is the quiet release of something that was never truly ours. There is something deeply healing in this. Life does not need to last forever to have value. Our kindness, our presence, our sincerity, these move forward in ways we do not always see. Not because we survive, but because life moves. And perhaps death is not really an ending at all. Birth and death are not opposite doors. They are simply 2 parts of one great cycle, the endless turning of life, shaping and reshaping itself. To be born, to live, to die, these are not separate steps. They are different phases of the same flowing process. When we see this, death no longer feels like being thrown out of life. It feels like quietly returning to it, in forms we do not need to own. Part 4. The ego that knows about no self is still the ego. There is a strange thing that often happens on the path of learning. After some time, people feel they already understand no self. They hear the question, if there is no self, then who is born? Who dies? And they quickly reply, no one. They believe they have reached the answer. But sometimes, this quick answer hides something they don't see, the quiet return of the ego. When we first start, we protect the story of me. We build it, we defend it, we are afraid of losing it. But after hearing the Buddha's teaching, we may slowly let go of that story. The danger is, the ego does not truly disappear. It simply changes its position. It moves from I am someone to I understand there is no one. It now begins to protect a new story, the story of being someone who understands. This is the ego's quiet trick. It doesn't need to say, I am special anymore. It can hide inside the thought, I have no self. It can quietly enjoy being the one who knows. It can find comfort in feeling a little bit further, a little bit higher than others who still seem confused. This feeling can grow without words. It lives in small moments, like when we feel pleased that others see us as wise, or when we feel slightly irritated that others don't get it yet. The ego does not care what we believe. It only cares about survival. It can wear many clothes. It can be the achiever, the victim, the student, the teacher. It can even wear the clothes of someone who has seen through the self. It is like water. It takes the shape of whatever container we give it. If we drop the old story, it will quietly build a new one. The Buddha warned about this subtle danger. Real wisdom is not about collecting the right answers. Real wisdom is not a position we hold. It is a gentle openness, a constant softening, where nothing needs to be defended anymore. When understanding becomes another thing we try to own, we are still trapped. We have just built a more clever kind of prison. Some people may notice this when they secretly enjoy feeling more awake than others. They may quietly think, I understand what most people miss. This is not freedom. This is another layer of self, smaller, quieter, but still there. The solution is not to fight the ego or to feel guilty when it appears. The key is to notice it gently, honestly. To see when we are building a position. To see when we are quietly protecting something. When we see it clearly without needing to attack it, it begins to loosen. We no longer need to hold on to the identity of the one who understands. The path is not about building the perfect view. It is about seeing, moment by moment, how the self keeps trying to return. And when we see that, we can meet it with patience, with clarity, without needing to claim anything. When there is nothing to hold, life becomes lighter. But how should we live in that space, where we no longer need to carry a fixed identity? What does a free life really look like? That is the next question. Part 5. So how should we live? When we begin to see that there is no solid self to defend, a quiet space starts to open in life. But this also leaves a simple, very human question. If there is no fixed me, then how should I live? What matters in a life where nothing can truly be owned? Many people think freedom means doing whatever we like. But the Buddha taught something deeper. Real freedom is not about chasing every desire or escaping every discomfort. It is about being free from the pressure to constantly react. It is about no longer needing to protect an identity, no longer needing to fix life to match our story. When we live this way, life becomes lighter. Not because it loses meaning, but because we no longer carry the weight of, "This must be mine," or "This must be me." Experiences still come. Joy and pain still come. But we don't need to hold them so tightly. They can flow through us without becoming who we are. This doesn't mean we become cold or distant. In fact, when we stop protecting the self, we often become more present, more caring. We are no longer so busy building a story that we miss the life that is right in front of us. In daily life, this shift can be very simple. Instead of saying, "I am afraid," we can notice, "Fear is here." Instead of saying, "I am angry," we can see, "Anger is present." This may sound like a small change, but it's not. It helps us see that fear and anger are conditions passing through, not permanent parts of who we are. We can stay with them without drowning in them. When we stop reacting to protect a self, we start responding with more clarity. We are less likely to hurt others just because our story feels threatened. We can speak more gently. We can listen more fully. Life becomes less about defending and more about being present. Love also changes. It is no longer something we try to control or possess. It is something that moves through us, something that flows when the walls around me are not so thick. When we don't need to prove who we are, compassion can rise naturally. Living this way is not about reaching a perfect state. There will still be moments when the old habit returns, when we suddenly feel the urge to grab, to defend, to build a story again. This is part of being human. The practice is to keep noticing, to see when we are holding, and gently let go. In the end, life does not need to be held tightly. It was never ours to keep. It was always moving, always changing. And when we see that, we can live more openly, more lightly, more at peace with what comes and what goes.